Is it worth using the triple captainship on Erling Haaland? What should we do with Jarell Quansah? Who are the best teams to target for the upcoming game weeks? Should you buy Rico Lewis? I've got some news as well on some potential future double game weeks. And with Tony being left out of the Brentford team for game week 1, should we be looking to buy Brian and Mbumo? Those are the questions that you guys have asked me, and I'm going to answer them in this video. All right, the first topic then I wanted to cover was, should you triple captain Erling Haaland? I briefly covered this on my ultimate guide video I uploaded on Sunday evening, so you might recognise this graphic. I just wanted to go through some, without looking at the potential double game weeks we've got coming up, which is what I've got an update on in a second. I just wanted to look, I guess, at the raw facts, the pros and cons of playing the triple captainship on him in game week 2. Pros, right? He's facing a newly promoted team at home. He's got Ipswich at home. And traditionally, I would say Haaland tends to perform better when he plays at the Etihad. He's fit and he's ready to go. If we wait till later on in the season, you can't guarantee that that's going to be the case. I've always found, I don't know if this is the case for absolutely everyone, but I've always found the triple captainship to be fairly disappointing. And the thought of just using it, getting it out the way on a fixture that's very favourable for probably the best player in the game, could be, just a good use of it, basically. Double game weeks will be less likely this season. I don't think we're going to get a whole boatload of double game weeks like we've seen in previous seasons. And right now, I think Haaland, if you have him, is going to be at his lowest ownership all season, right? A lot of people gone without him, seen that he's 15 million, didn't fancy him. He's played well against Chelsea, scored in game week 1. He's already one of the most popular players and popular transfers in for game week 2, which is obviously involving managers, I would guess, taking a hit to bring him in. And also, I just see him performing for the rest of the season. Right? We all know what Haaland's going to do. He's going to score 25 plus goals in the Premier League. That's pretty much a guarantee. So I don't see any reason why people owning him will be selling him. So right now, I just think he's at one of the lowest percentage ownerships he's going to be all season. And when you really want to get benefit out of your triple captain, it's best used on a game week where a player is going to score a load of points, but isn't all that popular, right? That, I think, is the best time to use a triple captain. That could be Erling Haaland, right? In terms of the cons, I don't actually think Ipswich are the worst promoted teams. If I were playing a triple captainship on a single game week, I would want to do it for a player that's at home against a promoted team. I really feel personally that there's such a gulf between, the steady, established Premier League teams, the teams basically that all stayed up last season, and the 3 that have been promoted. And I would probably say Ipswich are the strongest of the 3 that have been promoted, with Southampton and Leicester being a bit worse, in my personal opinion. It's also only game week 2, so there could be other opportunities to use that triple captainship later on. And I have seen it, right? He's not all that good. When he isn't getting touches in the box in clear-cut chances, Haaland doesn't necessarily offer all that much in games, and it does mean at times that he can disappear. I'm not saying he's going to do that against Ipswich, but he's the kind of player that doesn't necessarily get involved in all the build-up play, get many touches on the ball. So there are times, some games, where he could disappear. Do I think that will happen against Ipswich at home? Probably not, but it is something to bear in mind. All right, the next thing I wanted to talk about then was future double game weeks. So all of these tweets stemmed from a question that I actually asked to the fixture man, Ben Crellin himself. And thank you, Ben, for your reply. I asked him, basically said, what does it look like in terms of potential double game weeks coming up later in the season? And should I play my triple captainship on Erling Haaland? I basically asked Ben Crellin. You could see his response there. He thinks it's best to wait. Worst case scenario, we only get 2 double game weeks this season. So he's still expecting 2 doubles. And we might get more, right? Yeah. I think, he's of the opinion that you're best off waiting, basically. But I also wanted to extend this to actually provide some info on what the potential double game weeks later on in the season look like. So, we could have a double game week. Let's just read FPL Guru's tweet. So, these are the big teams' games in game weeks 29, 33, 34, and 36, right? So, if teams get to the EFL Cup final, they will blank in game week 29 and double in game week 33, which means that the fixture in 29 will likely move to game week 33. So that means Liverpool will have Villa and Leicester both away if they get to that EFL Cup final. Man City will have Brighton at home and Everton away in double game week 33, and Arsenal, Chelsea at home, Ipswich away. That could be the double game weeks for those teams. Now, they've only, FPL Gurus has picked those 3 teams because probably the most likely to get to the EFL Cup final and probably containing players that you would be wanting to triple captain. There's also the FA Cup semi-finals, which will cause a blank as well. So they will blank in game week 34 and double in game week 36. So for Liverpool, that means Spurs and Arsenal in a double game week. For Man City, that means Villa and Southampton. And for Arsenal, that means Palace and Liverpool. Obviously, all of this is hedging on those teams getting to the semi-finals of the FA Cup or the EFL Cup final, right? So there's a lot of questions and uncertainty up until that time. But just in terms of projecting future double game weeks, involving, I guess, players that you'd consider triple captaining. For me, I'd probably consider Cole Palmer on that list as well. So it might be worth in your own time researching the fixtures that Chelsea have. But ultimately, I think Salah, Haaland, Saka, Palmer, maybe Son as well. That's the kind of level of player you'd be looking to triple captain. And as long as they get to, as long as they get to the EFL Cup final or the FA Cup semi-final, it does look likely that these teams are going to have potential double game weeks. So the question is around, I'm not going to answer this question for you. I guess it's for you to work out. If you're considering triple captaining Erling Haaland, do you think, based on what I've just shared with you there, your, guess of probabilities of these teams making it to the late stages in these cup competitions and the quality of the potential double game weeks they could have, and of course, the odds that the player you want to triple captain is going to start both of those games, going to be fit, going to be in form, etc. Those are the kind of consideration points you need to have in mind when deciding if you want to use the triple captain on Haaland in Game Week 2. I don't know about you, but I have Jarell Quansah, and he's been a bit of a headache for me in Game Week 1. Now, I've found, this is courtesy of Fantasy Football Scout that have tweeted it out, I found a quote from Arne Slot around his decision to replace him. So it's kind of a tactical thing by the looks of it around him not necessarily winning that many duels. Okay, so it looked like aerial duels. He wasn't very happy with what Quansah was doing against Ipswich. Subbed him at half-time for Konate. Game Week 2's fixture for Liverpool is against Brentford. Brentford traditionally play with 3 at the back. So from set pieces, there's going to be 3 centre-backs in the box. So, that could mean aerial duels are going to be quite important in that game. So I would be a little bit concerned about Quansah starting in Game Week 2. Also, I would be a little bit concerned about his price dropping as well. So because he's owned by a fair few engaged managers, I would say Quansah is more of an engaged manager pick than most, because, he's not the first name you think of starting for Liverpool. Also, by the way, if you have him like I do, I just consider myself really unlucky. I feel like the justification was there to pick him. If I were to go back to the start of the season again, I think I would have picked him. I think he actually played really well against Ipswich, and kind of disagree with Slot. But what am I to say? I'm not a professional Premier League football manager, right? But I think he had a good game, and I still think he's going to start a good amount of games in the Premier League. And when you're looking at a Liverpool starting defender for $4.5 million, I still think that's really good value. But the thing to keep in mind is his price changing. What I've taken here is a key extract from the Fantasy Football Hub price change predictor. If you want to sign up to Fantasy Football Hub, there's a link in the description below. So his progress towards going down in price. So you've got to get to 100% to go down in price. What does that say? I need to get closer. 35.27% he is. I'm looking at the time. It's currently 3 p.m. on Monday, the 19th of July when I'm recording this, right? So he's 35% of the way to getting a price downgrade. Projecting how long it's going to take, the Fantasy Football Hub price change predictor says it's about a week. Now, I would suggest, right, price changes are going to be, most people make transfers towards the end or towards the, near time towards the deadline, right? And price changes in FPL are dependent on the number of times a player is sold or transferred in. So right now, this tool is projecting it to be about a week until he changes in price. But I would suggest most people that own Quansah are not the types of people to be making early transfers. So I would expect him probably to go down in price, because the amount of transfers the amount of transfers to remove him is going to go up as the week goes on, kind of like exponentially, because managers are going to want to wait. You could get training injuries, all sorts could happen in the meantime, right? There could potentially be an injury to Konate in training or something like that, right? He's traditionally quite an injury-prone player. So anything could happen in that time. So I would say probably sit on your laurels for a few days. But if it does look like he's come in really close to getting that price drop, it might well be worth transferring him out. Ultimately, I guess that's another one for your decision. I tend to not pay too much attention to price changes in FPL. But given if he does drop to 4.4 million, it does mean that you can only replace him with a 4 million defender, which is a bit of a problem because there aren't really that many good 4 million defenders. We saw that Barco didn't play. Johnson of Ipswich didn't play. You got the likes of Harwood, Bellis, Valfast. Those are the replacements you've got at the moment for Quansah if he does drop in price. Whereas we already know how many good 4.5 million defenders there are. So right now, my kind of tactic around Quansah is to keep an eye on his likelihood to change in price. Ultimately, I've got Anthony Robinson of Fulham on the bench. I'd be quite happy just to start my bench 4.5 defender over him anyway. But I would be a little bit worried about the price change because a bit of a nightmare really if he does drop to 4.4, and then that means the only natural replacement for him is a 4.0 defender. And making a defender transfer of that nature after game week 1 is pretty poor in my opinion. So yeah, lots to talk about there on Quansah, but that's kind of where my head is at with him. So next up then, I wanted to talk about Rico Lewis. He's a 4.5 million defender playing for Man City as their kind of attacking inverted fullback. The first thing I thought I'd mention is just a little bit about his position. So I watched the full Man City-Chelsea game, and Guardiola, who you would originally anticipate to be that more kind of attacking inverted fullback for Man City, the kind of João Cancelo role of seasons gone by, and obviously what he was doing at the end of last season where he got all of his attacking returns. With the two of them being in the same team, that being Lewis and Guardiola, it was actually Rico Lewis that played the more advanced role. Now, I looked at the SofaScore heat map, and it doesn't necessarily suggest a whole lot. Most of their time is spent in their own halves on the the various wings that they play on. But I did notice that Rico Lewis had much more activity in the opposition. You can see in the circle there, had much more time, touches, etc. in the opposition box and just outside of it, where of course attacking returns could come from than Guardiola did. You see that Guardiola there? He barely had a sniff really inside the box or around it, whereas Rico Lewis spent much more time sort of in far more advanced positions. So yeah, just something to bear in mind. You've got potentially, at face value at least, a 4.5 million starting Man City defender playing as that inverted fullback. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting that he is a clear-cut straight banker go in your team because I would expect rotation with Kyle Walker, right? There's no way that Kyle Walker doesn't get minutes in the Premier League this season. That's just not possible, in my opinion. He did, however, Lewis, he did start ahead of Walker in the Chelsea game, and I think he had a really good game as well. Like I said, he was the attacking fullback, whereas Guardiola wasn't really. And I think based on the performance against Chelsea, it would be really, really harsh for Pep to leave him out against Ipswich. I think he was so good against Chelsea that, yeah, I think he's going to play against Ipswich, and then it's kind of week on week depending on his performances whether he stays in the team. But another thing to say, and it kind of leads me on, I guess, to the teams to target, which we'll talk about in a second. Man City have 3 really nice fixtures coming up. Ipswich at home, West Ham away, and Brentford at home. And their clean sheet odds, according to Drafthound, for each of those 3 games are really strong. For 2 of them, they're over 50%. Ipswich is 65% to keep a clean sheet. West Ham 53%, so both of them, they're predicted to be more likely than not to keep a clean sheet in both of those games. In Brentford is 48. That's basically 50 anyway. So you can kind of say they're pretty much, good odds to keep a clean sheet. So next 3 games, he looks like he's going to start at least against Ipswich, and then it'll be performance based in my mind as to whether he stays in the team. He's looking really attacking, and Man City have got some great clean sheet odds. So I don't mind him as an option, but you have to bear in mind some potential rotation with Kyle Walker. So moving on then to the teams to target. So what I've done is basically picked out my favourite teams with favourable fixtures and good projections in terms of projected goals, clean sheets, etc. for the next 3-4 game weeks. Man City look really good. They've got Ipswich, West Ham, Brentford. Just spoke about those when going through Rico Lewis with great clean sheet odds. But not only from a clean sheet perspective are they good, they're also really good for odds of scoring over 2 goals. And you can see there the 11-5 projected goals have them scoring 3.18 goals against Ipswich, 2.13 against West Ham, and 2.64 against Brentford. So a little bit different to what Drafthound is saying, but they're different models, so they're going to be slightly different in terms of their outputs. But essentially, it's saying Man City are going to be good defensively in those games and score some goals. So for me, options I'd be considering, obviously Guardiola, spoken about Rico Lewis as well, potentially. I do think Oscar Bob being injured, the selling of Julian Alvarez is going to be good for Kevin De Bruyne. I think Kevin De Bruyne gets good minutes for at least the next 3 fixtures. Phil Foden, exactly when he's going to be back, I'm not 100% sure. He was on the bench in Game Week 1 against Chelsea. He could well start based on that in Game Week 2 against Ipswich. I wouldn't rule it out, but I'd probably wait to see what Pep has to say in his press conferences, and we might also get some leaks around whether he does start. But Phil Foden could be an option, as well, of course, as Erling Haaland. I would probably be a little bit hesitant to pick anyone else from Man City, just for not being 100% sure as to how Pep lines up. But yeah, Man City look like a really good team to target, and I think, based on what I've said there are 3 or 4 options you could pick from. I also really don't mind Chelsea. Now, obviously, their clean sheet odds and projected goals are not quite as high as Man City. The models don't favour them as much, and they're not as good as a team, right? They just lost 2-0 at home to them. But they got Wolves, Crystal Palace, Bournemouth and West Ham in the next 4. I suggest that's 4 pretty good fixtures. The clean sheet odds, they don't look too bad. Usually when I go through the clean sheet odds for some of the other videos I make, I usually say defenders under 30% I'd be hesitant to start. But Chelsea have 4 fixtures here where they're over 30% to keep a clean sheet. And their projected goals are not so bad either. The one concern around Chelsea, though, is how do they line up? They've got about 1 million players in their squad at the moment. So it's a pretty, thin list of players I would say you could absolutely bank on playing. But I do think the lineup against Man City kind of taught us a lot as to how Enzo Maresca wants to play. And I think there are definitely some players you can kind of hang your hat on that should probably play all 4 of those games. Rob Sanchez appears to be his first choice goalkeeper. Barring any mistakes that he makes in these games, I think he'll probably stay in the team for the 4 fixtures. It looks like he's favouring Wesley Fofana and Levi Colwill as centre-back. Gusto's playing right-back currently, until, of course, Reece James comes back from his suspension, so I'll probably rule him out. Cucurella played at left-back. He won the Euros. Big hype around. I think he's probably going to stay in the team. Enzo Fernandez, club captain at the moment. You wouldn't really want to pick him in FPL, though. Cole Palmer, I think is obvious. He's going to play every minute of every game on penalties, free kicks, you name it. He's on it all. He's my picture on this slide. I think he's going to be really good for those fixtures and do really well. He could have got a goal. He shot from outside the box, which Ederson kind of, fumbled basically, which could have led to a Nicholas Jackson goal and a Palmer assist. So he had a chance of getting attacking returns against Man City, and I think he'll obviously get attacking returns in those 4 games. No doubt in my mind. Forwards, though, for Chelsea, confusing. Nkunku played limited minutes. I think he got subbed off in the 59th minute against Man City. They've got Pedro Neto, Raheem Sterling, who's kicking up a fuss about not playing, Mudryk, Nicholas Jackson, Lukaku. They're probably not going to play, but there's just so many options in that Chelsea front line. I'd probably say I wouldn't really bank on any of them. So I'd say my favourite Chelsea players currently are probably more defensive than they are attacking. Cole Palmer is probably the only Chelsea attacker I'd absolutely bank on having in my team. And defensively wise, I think Cucurella, Wesley Fofana, Levi Colwill and Sanchez could be decent as well, particularly with those next 4 fixtures in mind. I don't think Chelsea actually looked all that bad against Man City, to be completely honest with you. I think they win 2 or 3 of those next 4 and could keep 2 or 3 clean sheets as well. That's just my opinion, though. Feel free to disagree in the comments. The next team I really like the look of for the next 4 is Liverpool. Not necessarily as much from a defensive perspective, but attacking-wise, I think their next 4 games are really kind. I know they've got Man United away in Game Week 3, but they were okay against Fulham, I'll admit, and probably will improve upon last season. But Liverpool always seem to go to Old Trafford and score goals, so I wouldn't rule out them scoring there. You can see the projected goals for the next 4. They're expected to score, according to 11FI at least, over 2 goals in all of their upcoming 4 games, right? So that suggests to me that the Liverpool attackers are going to be really good. The question you'd ask, though, is who from that Liverpool attack would you pick? And I think, again, similar to what we've seen from Chelsea in Game Week 1, under a new manager, etc., we learned a lot from that Liverpool lineup against Ipswich. I think Salah is obviously a good option. Diogo Jota seems to be the kind of first choice middleman in that front 3. I think he's a really good option, particularly with those next 4 fixtures in mind. Then outside of that, I think Luis Diaz probably plays on the left wing the most, but I don't think he's necessarily the most exciting FPL pick. And outside of that, defensively, you got Van Dijk, who's going to play every game. Probably not get that many attacking returns, but just be a solid, steady Eddie who plays every game. Then, of course, Trent. Trent is a player that can get attacking returns and clean sheets, so he can score points through 3 different means. Goals, assists, clean sheets, and he's always really good for bonus points, just with the amount of chances he creates each game. So yeah, those are probably my favourite Liverpool assets, and of course, they have a really favourable fixture run, particularly from an attacking perspective. And the final team I'm really intrigued by is Newcastle. Again, similar to, I would say, Liverpool, more from an attacking perspective than I would be from a defensive perspective. I would pretty much back Newcastle to be able to keep a clean sheet against anyone at St James's Park. They seem to be, particularly at home, really good defensively. But 3 of their next 4 games are away from home, which would put me off a little bit from them defensively. But I do think they've got really good chances of scoring a good amount of goals in all of those games. Analysing those teams, right, Bournemouth, fairly good defence, but I do think Newcastle could score there. Tottenham, I don't think are actually all that good defensively. That could be a really high-scoring game, that actually, Newcastle v Tottenham. Wolves look one of the weaker teams in the league, so I would probably say they score a fair few there. And likewise, Fulham as well. I think Newcastle could score against them. So, yeah, based on that, I'd probably be looking to pick attacking Newcastle defenders and Newcastle attackers. For me, that would be probably 3 players at the moment. Isak, Gordon and Lewis Hall. I would be looking to target those players if you want to get them in your team with those 4 fixtures in mind. I wanted to do a quick feature on Bryan Mbeumo. In case you missed it, he was in the team. Tony wasn't in the team. And I think Bryan Mbeumo, when Tony doesn't play for Brentford, is one of the best players in FPL. A 7 million midfielder, He's going to play every game, largely for 90 minutes. He didn't play 90 this week, but pretty close. Takes penalties, free kicks, and just becomes the team's absolute talisman without Tony. Now, obviously, Tony looks to be close to leaving Brentford. He was flirting with it all season. One of the Saudi Arabian clubs, I believe it's Al Ali, has put in an offer for him. I can't imagine he's short of offers from other Premier League teams as well. I'm sure he's trying to cook up a move. And as a result, Thomas Frank left him out of the team in Gameweek 1, and they also won without him. So I'd probably say don't bring him in just yet because you can't be totally sure about what's happening with Ivan Toney. And the Brentford fixtures are relatively tough as well till game weeks 5 and 6. We get to game week 5 and 6. We have certainty about Tony's future at that point. If he stayed at Brentford, obviously the transfer window is probably going to be finished by then, or if he goes, that will kind of allow you, I think, to make a decision on him. But what I've done here is taken a tweet from Rob T FPL. I've used quite a lot of Rob T FPL's projections in my videos gone by. What he does is take betting market data and turns that into FPL related projections. And what he's got here is a proportion of the Brentford goals that Mbeumo will be projected to score according to the betting markets, which again, I always like to look at betting markets because gambling companies spend so much money on their maths to project these odds because ultimately they want to win profit. And it's more than any FPL tool does, right? They spend literally millions, doing maths to work out the projection of things happening. So I'd stand by these odds. And what Rob T FPL has noticed, before Tony was left out in Game Week 1, and Mbeumo was expected, according to the bookmakers, to score 19% of Brentford's goals. After Game Week 1, it's now gone up to 26%. So Brentford scored 56 goals in the Premier League last season. 26% of that, you can work it out yourself. I think Mbeumo is going to be a really good option if Tony leaves, basically. My personal projection, if I was my personal sort of betting market projection, I think Tony leaving will give Mbeumo, I think Mbeumo will finish on 15 goals, double-digit assists maybe, sort of 20 to 25 attacking returns across the season if Tony leaves Brentford. That's kind of where I project it to end up. A player that gets 20 to 25 attacking returns for 7 million, I think is a really good price. And if he does get all those attacking returns, be the Brentford talisman, I think he's going to be good for bonus points as well, which means even more FPL points on top of that. So yeah, Bryan Mbeumo is looking like a really exciting option, but I'd want to wait a little bit more time just to see exactly what's happening with Tony and just to get the cruel early Brentford fixtures out of the way. All right, and that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. I think everyone asked me some really good questions here. I think that kind of sorts all the key questions and dilemmas that people might be having going into Game Week 2. I think that's most of the big narratives that came out of Game Week 1. Although if I did miss anything, well, the Tottenham-Leicester game, to be fair, hasn't been played at the time that I'm recording this video. So that might leave some more questions, which I'll answer in a future video. But if there's anything I did miss and you still want to know about it, feel free to let me know in the comments. Also, just generally, if you disagree with anything I've had to say in this video, I'd be interested to hear in the comments as well. It's interesting when people challenge me on my opinions. Just be nice about it. I'll respect you if you're polite. So yeah, I think that's it for the video. If you enjoyed it, found it useful, please leave me a like rating and you can subscribe to the Goal to Goal channel, which should be just there on your screen. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.